All right, everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Whatever time it is that this reaches you, I just wanted to share a bit, a visual representation of the literary essay, the literature essay for you, just an example, so that those of you who need to have that visual, you can get some help. And then for the rest of us, I believe that using the color scheme that I have used here will help you to see the pattern or the organization that you need to strive toward, right? So here's a question from Animal Farm, and this text you would have studied before, so I use this one because you're familiar with it. The question says, in the novel Animal Farm, some characters used their authority in a negative way. Describe one such character from the novel. Explain how he used his power negatively. Discuss how one narrative technique was used to show the use of power in the novel. Now, I want you to remember that the literature essay question, really has three parts. The first part tends to not be as hard to remember. The second part, of course, goes a little deeper. And then the third part usually focuses on a technique that is used to highlight a particular theme or a particular issue, particular setting, etc. in the story or the poem or the play, whichever genre it is that you are studying. Okay, so this is what I have done. As you are seeing here, I would have used my colors, and you're going to see that they're consistent because what I want you to see is the connection between the question and how we are answering, right? So right here, let me do it this way. Right here, we have the first part of the question, okay? Right here, of course, the second part of the question. And then, let me use this one. Second part of the question right here. Good. All right. And then, of course, over here, we have the third part of the question, right? Okay, let me do it this way. Wonderful. The third part of the question over here. And of course, let me use another one. Let me use a squiggly line this time. So here is the third part of our question, okay? Nah, let's not use that one. Let's call it a simpler. Third part of our question. I need everybody to remember that your essay is about answering the question. Your essay is not about sharing everything you know, and you have to avoid that temptation because many a person has written a very flamboyant, lengthy essay, but the essay did not answer the question. Please remember that your essay is all about answering your question, all right? And so you have to be very careful that that is exactly what you do. So just like I have it here, you read your question and you can highlight, you can probably circle the first instruction that you get, or if you have, a highlighter, you probably highlight it. Then probably you could just underline the second, because in an exam context, you might not have the time to search for 3 different color highlighters, but you could be creative. You could circle the first instruction, underline the second, and probably put a box around the third. You could do something like that, right? That way it would draw your attention to the different aspects of the question in their own right, okay? All right. So that's the very first thing. We need to spend a little time with the question, looking at the instructions that we have been given in the question. The second thing that we do, of course, is that we get to planning our essay. So having read the question, we need to make up in our minds now, all right? I need to describe one such character. Which character am I going to choose that uses authority, you know, in this novel? Now, in order for you to choose anything from your story or your poem or your play to answer the question, you have to read all three sections. It is when you have read all three sections that you can choose the best option. So if you would have read just the first section here, describe one such character, and then you just, move in, you might end up choosing a character who might not be able to work for this second part of the question, right? And so it's very important that when you select your character, you do that after you have read through everything and you now make your best choice. Remember that we don't have time to be making mistakes in an exam context. We have to read through, think through, process well, and use our best options, right? So here we are. We have singled out each instruction in the question, and then we have read through to see which character, in this case, it's a character. We have read through to see which character would be the best character for us to use to answer the question. It is extremely important. Again, I have to say it, it's extremely important that we choose the right one, right? And then the other thing that we also need to ensure we choose the right one for is this third part of the question, the narrative technique. Of course, we have already spoken in class about some ways that we can identify the narrative technique and the best ones, or the major ones in particular work. All right, so let me just remind you then, or remind us, when we are moving into our essay, please remember that our essays must have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. If you have no introduction, you have no brain. You have no head and you have no brain. If you have no body, well, you have no body. And if you have no feet, no conclusion, then your essay is going nowhere. Your essay is going nowhere. Right. So let's remember then, we must have our introduction. And I'm going to take these off afterward because no essay should be submitted with the labeling of the different sections of the essay, right? I'm just doing this here to remind you of what it is you're doing in each section of your essay, but you should not submit an essay with any labels, with labeling your different parts, okay? Now, because we are doing an essay where we have three different parts, then you would have three different body paragraphs. Please remember that. Each section of the question would be dealt with in its own paragraph. So the first section here, as you can see from my color scheme, has its own paragraph. The second section here with the black background, its own paragraph. And this section here with the yellow background has its own paragraph. It's important for you to remember that, all right? Now, let's go down. So we have our introduction, which we must have if we are going to write an essay. The introduction is the head of the essay, the body is the body, and the conclusion is the feet. Fine? So again, if we have no head, then you are walking around like headless chickens. We have essays walking around like headless chickens. We don't need them. Okay, describe one such character. So in the novel Animal Farm, some characters use their authority in a negative way. Describe one such character. Again, based on the sentence before, we know we're looking for a character who used his power in a negative way. Explain how he used his power negatively. Discuss how one narrative technique was used to show the use of power in the novel. All right. Now, notice that the word negatively does not come back in the third section of the question. However, the prompt would have told us it's negative use of power. That second section in the black background told us the character would have used his power negatively. And therefore, when we come to the third section of the novel, we have to maintain the same idea that the power was used negatively, or the authority was used negatively. Where can you find animals that talk? Animal Farm, of course. All right. Now, please remember that our introduction must have three things. Your introduction must have your AG, which is your attention grabber. Please do not forget it. Your introduction must have an attention grabber. And then, of course, if we are speaking about a novel, then we underline the name of the novel. If this were a poem found within a collection of poems, then we would have placed quotation marks. And if it were a short story, also found within a collection of short stories, we would have placed quotation marks. If it's a play and the play is found in a book, and that's the only thing in the book, then of course we would underline. So the same obtains for if it's a novel or a play and the book is really the story, then we underline. If, however, the story is found in a collection of other stories, then we would use the quotation marks. All right. So you have your attention grabber, which you must have. You cannot speak to someone without first getting that person's attention. So we have our attention grabber. The other thing, of course, that our story will have is what we call the background information, right? You don't just jump into the thing without giving the person a little understanding of what went on there and what this thing is all about. So we give a bit of a background. And then the third thing that we do, so your background will extend all the way down. It says, where can you find animals that can talk? Animal Farm, of course, right? The novel was written by George Orwell and is a representation of life in the Russian society. In the novel, we learn about the Russian Revolution and the leaders involved. So we've gotten a little background information, right? And then the third thing, of course, that we must have in our introduction is the brain of our essay. The brain, I call it the brain, I call it the spine, I call it the lifeline of your essay.